The whispers sliced through the warm Tennessee air like shards of glass. "There's that gay voice again," a cousin sneered, loud enough for Elliot Harper to hear as he adjusted the microphone stand. He froze, his heart a drumbeat in his chest, but he forced a smile, the kind that hid a lifetime of scars. Elliot stood at the edge of the dance floor, the barn's fairy lights casting a soft glow on his tailored navy suit. His brother Caleb's wedding was picture-perfect: rolling hills, a crimson sunset, and a crowd of family and friends from their small town of Franklin. But for Elliot, every step through this celebration felt like walking a tightrope over a pit of judgment. At 26, he was used to the snickers about his effeminate tone, his expressive hands, his everything. Tonight, though, he wasn't just the gay little brother. He was the one Caleb had begged to sing at the reception, a song Elliot had written himself, a secret he'd kept even from his brother. The band behind him strummed the opening chords, and Elliot's fingers trembled around the microphone. He caught Caleb's eye across the room, his older brother beaming beside his new bride, Sarah, a vision in white lace. Caleb, 32, broad-shouldered and rugged, was the golden son of the Harper family, star quarterback, war veteran, the man who could do no wrong. Elliot, with his theater degree and glittery dreams, was the oddity, the one their father, Hank, called a disappointment behind closed doors. "Get on with it, fairy," another voice muttered from the crowd, low but venomous. Elliot's breath hitched, but he closed his eyes, letting the music pull him in. This wasn't just a performance. It was his chance to prove he was more than their mockery, more than the boy who'd been pushed into shadows his whole life. As the melody swelled, Elliot's voice soared, a clear, soulful tenor that silenced the murmurs. The song, "Roots of Us," was a love letter to family, to resilience, to secrets buried deep. Each note carried the weight of his truth, and as he sang, he felt the crowd's eyes shift from judgment to curiosity. His mother, Linda, sat at the front table, her hands clasped tightly, her face unreadable. Hank, beside her, stared at his beer, refusing to meet Elliot's gaze. The first verse painted a picture of their childhood, two brothers running through Tennessee fields, chasing fireflies under a starlit sky. But as the chorus hit, Elliot's voice cracked with emotion, hinting at something deeper, something untold. He sang of secrets kept in silent nights, of truths that break to set us right. The guests leaned forward, sensing the shift. Caleb's smile faltered, his brow furrowing as he sensed the song's undercurrent. Elliot had spent months crafting this piece, pouring his heart into lyrics that wove their family's history with a revelation he'd uncovered only weeks ago. It was a secret that could shatter the Harper family's carefully polished image, one he'd wrestled with exposing. But tonight, under the weight of their scorn, he knew he had to sing it, not for revenge, but for freedom. As the first 1,000 words of his story unfolded, Elliot's mind flashed back to the moment he'd found the truth. It was in their attic, sorting through old boxes after their grandmother's passing. A letter, yellowed and tucked inside a forgotten journal, revealed a truth about Caleb that even he didn't know, a truth that explained why Hank had always favored him, why their family's love had always felt conditional. Elliot had cried that night, not for himself, but for the brother he loved despite their distance. Now, on this wedding stage, every lyric was a step toward that truth. The crowd was no longer whispering. They were captivated, some swaying, some wiping tears. Sarah, Caleb's bride, clutched her husband's arm, her eyes locked on Elliot. The song's second verse dove deeper, hinting at a father's shame, a mother's silence, and a brother's hidden pain. Elliot's voice trembled but held strong, each note a defiance against the years of being less than. As the first part of the story closed, Elliot reached the bridge of the song, his voice rising to a haunting crescendo. The lyrics danced around the secret without naming it, leaving the crowd hanging on the edge of revelation. He glanced at Caleb, whose face had paled, his eyes searching Elliot's for answers. The air was thick with tension, the kind that promised something unforgettable was coming. The barn seemed to hold its breath as Elliot's voice lingered on the final note of the bridge. The fairy lights flickered, casting long shadows across the wooden beams, and for a moment, the world was just him and the microphone. Then, a single clap broke the silence, followed by another, until the room erupted in applause, not the polite kind, but the kind that felt like a tidal wave. Elliot's chest heaved, his eyes scanning the crowd. Some faces were wet with tears, others wide with shock. His cousin, the one who'd mocked him earlier, sat stone-faced, his drink untouched. Linda, their mother, was crying now, her hands covering her mouth. Hank's jaw was tight, his knuckles white around his beer bottle. Caleb, though, was the one Elliot couldn't look away from. His brother's eyes were a storm of confusion and something deeper, fear, maybe, or recognition. The band eased into the third verse, and Elliot steadied himself. This was it, the part where the song would peel back the layers of their family's facade. The lyrics turned sharper, more pointed, singing of a father's lie to shield his pride, and a son who never knew his truth. Elliot's voice was a blade, cutting through years of silence. He wasn't just singing for himself anymore. He was singing for Caleb, for the brother who'd been shaped by a secret he didn't even know. Flashbacks flooded Elliot's mind as he sang. He remembered the letter he'd found in the attic, written in their grandmother's shaky hand. It spoke of a time before Caleb was born, when Hank, young and desperate, had made a choice that changed their family forever. The letter revealed that Caleb wasn't Hank's biological son, a fact buried to protect the Harper name in their conservative town. Linda had known, had carried the weight of that secret, but Caleb had been raised as Hank's own, the favored child to compensate for Hank's shame. Elliot had spent weeks grappling with what to do. Tell Caleb privately? Confront their parents? He'd chosen the song because music was his language, the only way he could make them all feel the weight of the truth. As he sang, he wove in memories of their childhood. Caleb teaching him to throw a football, Caleb shielding him from bullies, Caleb always being the hero. But the hero had been lied to, and Elliot's heart broke to reveal it. The crowd was spellbound now, sensing the story's depth without knowing the details. Sarah's grip on Caleb's arm tightened, her eyes darting between the brothers. Elliot's voice softened, the melody turning tender as he sang of love that endures despite lies, of family that could heal if they faced the truth. He locked eyes with Caleb, willing him to understand that this wasn't betrayal, it was love. As the second 1,000 words unfolded, the song reached its climax. Elliot's voice soared, raw and powerful, as he sang the final lines of the verse. The truth we hide will set us free, if we can face the roots of we. The crowd was on its feet now, some clapping, some crying, but Caleb remained frozen, his face a mask of shock. Elliot knew the secret hadn't fully landed yet. That would come in the final chorus, the moment he'd been dreading and craving. The band slowed, giving Elliot a moment to breathe. He stepped back from the microphone, his heart pounding. The weight of what he was about to do felt like a boulder on his chest. He glanced at his parents, Linda's tears, Hank's clenched fists, and then back at Caleb, who looked like he was bracing for a blow. The air was electric, the tension unbearable, as the story prepared to tip into its most dramatic turn. The band's soft strumming faded, leaving only the hum of anticipation in the barn. Elliot's hands shook as he gripped the microphone, his voice steadying for the final chorus, the moment he'd reveal the secret that could either break or mend his family. He looked at Caleb, his brother's eyes pleading for answers, and felt a pang of guilt mixed with resolve. The chorus began, slow and deliberate, each word heavy with meaning. You are not his, but you are mine, Elliot sang, his voice cracking with emotion. A brother's love will stand through time. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath as the truth landed. Caleb's face crumpled, his hand dropping from Sarah's. Hank stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor, his face red with fury. Linda reached for him, but he pulled away, storming toward the exit. Elliot kept singing, his voice a lifeline through the chaos. The lyrics told of a father's lie, a mother's sacrifice, and a brother's choice to speak the truth. He didn't name names, didn't spell out the details, but the implication was clear. Caleb wasn't Hank's biological son, and the Harper family's perfect image was a facade. The crowd was a mix of shock and empathy, some reaching for each other's hands, others whispering in disbelief. As the song ended, Elliot's voice softened to a whisper, the final note hanging in the air like a prayer. Silence followed, heavy and profound, until Sarah stood, clapping fiercely, tears streaming down her face. Others joined, the applause building into a roar, but Elliot barely heard it. His eyes were on Caleb, who hadn't moved, his expression unreadable. The third 1,000 words dove into the aftermath. Caleb walked toward Elliot, the crowd parting like a sea. "What the hell was that?" he demanded, his voice low but shaking. Elliot stepped off the stage, his heart in his throat. "I found a letter, Caleb. From Grandma. You deserve to know who you are." Caleb's fists clenched, but he didn't swing. Instead, he turned and walked out of the barn, Sarah hurrying after him. Elliot stood alone, the weight of his choice crashing down. Had he gone too far? Had he lost his brother forever? The crowd's applause faded as people began to murmur, some approaching Elliot with words of support, others glaring with disapproval. Linda found him next, her face streaked with tears. "Why, Elliot? Why tonight?" she whispered. He swallowed hard, his voice barely audible. "Because he deserves the truth, Mom. And so do I." She hugged him, a rare gesture, and for a moment, he felt the warmth of her love, a love he'd always craved but rarely received. Outside, under the starlit sky, Elliot found Caleb sitting on a hay bale, Sarah beside him. The conversation that followed was raw, painful, and honest. Caleb didn't want to believe it, but the pieces fit. Hank's favoritism, Linda's quiet guilt, the distance between them all. Elliot shared the letter's details, his voice steady despite the tears. "You're still my brother," he said. "Nothing changes that." As the third part closed, Caleb's anger softened into something else, grief, maybe, or acceptance. The brothers sat in silence, the wedding party continuing in the distance, as the story poised for its next turn. The night air was cool against Elliot's skin as he sat beside Caleb, the distant hum of the wedding reception fading into the background. Fireflies danced in the fields, their glow a quiet contrast to the storm inside the brothers. Sarah had left them to talk, her hand lingering on Caleb's shoulder as she whispered, "I'm here when you need me." Caleb stared at the ground, his voice rough when he finally spoke. "You should have told me privately, Elliot. Not like that, not in front of everyone." Elliot nodded, guilt gnawing at him. "I know, but I was afraid you'd shut me out. I needed you to hear it, to feel it." Caleb's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he asked, "Who's my real father?" Elliot recounted the letter's details. A man named Daniel, a musician who'd loved Linda, but left Franklin before Caleb was born. Hank had stepped in, marrying Linda to save her reputation. But his resentment had festered, spilling onto Elliot, the son who reminded him of Daniel's free spirit. Caleb listened, his face a mask of pain, processing a truth that rewrote his life. The fourth 1,000 words explored the brothers' bond, strained but unbroken. They talked for hours, memories spilling out. Good ones, like fishing trips on the Harpeth River, and painful ones, like Hank's coldness toward Elliot. Caleb admitted he'd always felt a divide, a sense that he had to earn Hank's love. "I thought it was because I wasn't enough," he said. Elliot reached for his hand. You were always enough. He just couldn't see it. Back at the reception, the mood had shifted. Some guests avoided Elliot, their whispers now about the family drama, but others approached with empathy. A teenage cousin, Mia, hugged him tightly. Your song was beautiful, she said. I'm proud of you. Her words were a balm, a reminder that not everyone saw him as less than. Hank, however, was nowhere to be found. Linda later told Elliot he'd driven off, too angry to face the truth. She confessed her own role in keeping the secret, her voice heavy with regret. I thought I was protecting you both, she said. Elliot hugged her, forgiving her in a way he hadn't expected to. As the night wore on, Caleb and Elliot returned to the barn, hand in hand, a gesture that drew stares but felt right. Sarah joined them, her love for Caleb unwavering. The brothers danced together to a slow country song, a moment of defiance against the judgment they'd both faced. The crowd watched, some smiling, some uncomfortable, but for once, Elliot didn't care. He was done hiding. The fourth part ended with the brothers standing together, stronger for their shared truth. The wedding was winding down, but the real work, rebuilding their family, was just beginning. Elliot felt a spark of hope, knowing that whatever came next, they'd face it together. The morning after the wedding, the Harper family home was quiet, the kind of quiet that follows a storm. Elliot sat at the kitchen table, a mug of coffee cooling in his hands. As Caleb walked in, his eyes red from a sleepless night. They hadn't spoken since the dance, but the silence wasn't heavy. It was healing. I read the letter, Caleb said, sitting across from him. It's real, isn't it? Elliot nodded, his throat tight. I'm sorry it came out like that. But I'm not sorry, you know. Caleb managed a small smile, the first since the song. You're braver than me, Elle. Always have been. The final 1,000 words wove the story to its close. Hank returned that afternoon, his anger cooled but his pride still wounded. In a tense family meeting, he admitted the truth, his voice gruff but honest. I loved you both, he said, looking at Caleb, then Elliot. I just didn't know how to show it. It wasn't a full apology, but it was a start, and for Elliot, it was enough. The brothers spent the next days rebuilding. Caleb decided to search for Daniel, not to replace Hank, but to understand himself. Elliot helped, tracking down old records and contacts, their bond growing stronger with each shared step. Linda, too, began to open up, sharing stories of her youth that Elliot had never heard. The family wasn't whole yet, but it was healing stitch by stitch. At a small gathering a week later, Elliot performed Roots of Us again, this time at Caleb's request. The song felt different now, less like a weapon, more like a bridge. The guests, fewer but kinder, listened with open hearts. Mia, the cousin, recorded it, and the video went viral online, not for the drama but for its raw honesty. Messages poured in from strangers, thanking Elliot for his courage, for showing that love could outshine shame. The story closed with Elliot and Caleb standing on the porch, watching another Tennessee sunset. You think we'll be okay? Caleb asked. Elliot smiled, his voice soft but sure. We're already okay. We're us. The secret had broken them open, but it had also set them free, proving that truth, however painful, could lead to love. The ending was bittersweet but hopeful, a testament to resilience and the power of authenticity. Elliot's gay voice wasn't just heard, it was celebrated, a beacon for others to find their own. The Harper family, flawed and fractured, was finding its way back together, one honest note at a time.